Hello everyone and welcome back to the iCode channel. Today I'm going to show you guys how to configure the Retropie 4 with the iCode Duo Plus. This is the Plus Pro adapter, but both the Plus and the Plus Pro work very similarly with the Atari Joystick, Paddles, and then some people ask me about the Hyperkin Ranger controller. This is a controller with a 9-pin connector that you can connect to your Atari console, and it works both as a joystick and a paddle. It has a wheel on the side. And then, of course, your fire button here. Really nicely made controller. You can work right hand and left hand as well. So I want to show you how to configure that as well. So let's get started. As you can see, I've got my device on. I've connected my joystick to port 1 of the device, and it's ready to be configured. I've loaded a stock Retropie with emulation station that comes with the image right on the system, on the unit, and we're going to go ahead and configure it together on the stock model. So let's go to the main menu, and you go down to configure input. Now that you've got your joystick connected, I'm going to go ahead and start that process and say yes. We'll notice that it detected a couple gamepads because we've got 2 ports here, and probably I've got a keyboard connected or some other devices. But we're going to hold the fire button down, which is button A, and it's going to recognize that we're configuring this joystick, and we're going to push up because it's asking us to push up, down, left, right. Notice that it picked up the axis. And then for start button, I like to use the black button here, which is button 7, and then select will be the white button, and then button A, your red button, button B, button X is white, yellow button, and the blue is the last one. Okay, so that's the buttons configuration. Now, if you have the Plus edition, you're not going to have these additional buttons on the left. So I'm going to go ahead and configure left shoulder and right shoulder because I'm going to use these 2 buttons on the left side for those. But you can just skip those by pushing the down arrow. And then I'm going to go ahead and skip the rest here to go down to left analog up. This is where we want to configure our paddles. Okay, so we're ready to connect our paddles, and I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the joystick, and I'm going to go ahead and hit my paddle wire here. And before I connect it, I want to make sure that I'm in about center position. So, spin it all the way to both directions and find the center approximately. And put the paddle right in the middle. I've got a little markers already on them. So close to the center is okay. Don't worry if it's not exact. And I'm going to connect the paddles in. And you'll notice that the device hasn't picked it up yet, but that's okay. So, and for some reason it moved down. So I'm going to go ahead and push up arrow on my keyboard to go to analog up. That's what we want to be on when we configure this. So for analog up, we're going to use the left player 2 paddle, and we're going to go counterclockwise. So that's that way. Actually, it has to detect the paddles first. So I went to the right. It did detect the paddles now. So you can see on my display, the paddles are now working. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to go back up because it didn't pick up the right ones. So for left analog up, we're going to go ahead and do counterclockwise, as I mentioned. Okay. It looks like it did pick it up. And for analog down, we're going to do clockwise, which is already taken because it's already got it. And then for the left one, we're going to go ahead and this is player 1. We're going to go to the left and then to the right. Okay. And then that's pretty much it. Then we're going to go down to hotkey enable. But before I do that, these are the ones that said not, if you made a mistake for something and you can't tell what it is, if you hold down, like, let's say your fire button on the joystick, well, I don't have the joystick connected, but maybe this red button, and hold it down, it'll erase it completely. So I can go now back up, and you can see that left analog up is not defined. I'm going to go ahead and erase this one too by holding the key down. Okay, so they're both now not defined. And then I'm going to do them over again just to be safe. So this was this one here, left. I'm going to push to the left. There it is, access 3 negative, and then the right, access 3 plus. Okay, I think we've got it. So now we're going to go to our hotkey. For the hotkey, you've got the Plus Edition, just use the select button. If you've got the Plus Pro, I like to use this button here. Okay, and that's going to be the hotkey we're going to press to get into RetroArch menu, and it's going to be important, and you'll see that in a minute. And we're done with basically configuring the device. So next is the configuration for the games. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the menu. And first I'm going to connect back my joystick. Okay. And I'm going to make sure that I can navigate, so you can see I'm moving up and down, working fine, left and right. It's working fine. So that's good. So we're going to go to Atari 2600, and I've loaded some ROMs here. So the first game we want to try is Combat, because it's a 2-player game, and we can check all the directions and fire button. Now, if you remember, we mapped the fire button to button A so that we can navigate through the menu and press the button to start the game, for example. That's why button A is important, because it makes it simpler to navigate through the emulation station menu. However, the stock Stella 2014 core that's loaded for the Atari emulation, for some reason, by default, it wants fire button to be button B. So most likely our button is not going to work, but let's give it a try. I'm going to go ahead and push start, which was the black button. Game started, you can hear it. And I'm going to move. Sure enough, it does move. And yep, the button's not working. So let's see what we need to do to make the button work. So remember the hotkey, I mapped it to this button on the left side. For you, it may be this button here. I'm going to go ahead and hold it down, and then I'm going to push the yellow button, which is X. That's going to get us to the RetroArch menu, and go down to Controls, and go down to Port 1 Controls, which is on the first port. And notice that the fire button is mapped to the second button. This is the first button. This is the second button. So this is the challenge with this core, but it's easy to fix. Just go to the first one here and hit the button and map it to fire. Okay, like that. So both now say fire. So both button A and button B, if this joystick had a 2-button stick, would have been, both of them would have worked as fire buttons. Okay, so that's set for this one. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing for port 2 of the device. So the second player can also work. I'm going to go down to this auto 0, and I'm going to put this one to also say fire. Okay, so now they're both marked as fire, as you can see. So that's pretty good. And what we want to do is we want to save this so that all Atari games will use this mapping. So we don't have to do this every time. So I'm going to go to up to Save Core Remap File, and that'll save it for the entire core. And there's to it. Then I'm going to go back a couple of times, go to the quick menu, and resume. So let's see if now this is working, and sure enough, the fire button is working. So let's go ahead and try this Harpican controller that I was talking about and see how that joystick works for player 2. It should work right out of the box. I'm going to go ahead and connect it. This second port. Okay. I think I have it on paddle mode. Okay, I put it back into stick mode. I flip the stick. Now you can see it is working. So there it is. Okay, so we've got our joystick and the Hyperkin joystick also working. But what about paddles? Let's make sure we can get some paddle games going as well. I'm going to go ahead and exit the game by pressing the hotkey and start at the same time. There it is. Okay, and we're going to go up to Breakout, which is a paddle game, and it is multiplayer. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the Hyperkin, and I'm going to disconnect the joystick, and I'm going to connect our wonderful paddles. And if the device doesn't pick up the paddles, what you want to do is move the paddles all the way to the right, and then it will pick up the paddles. Notice now it did pick them up, and both paddles are functional. The top is player 1 and bottom is player 2. Okay, so just remember that top is player 1. So I'm going to put them in, roughly in the middle position here, and we're going to go back to the game here. Okay, so notice when I move the paddles, nothing is happening, and even if I push start the game, my paddle is doing some funky stuff. Not really. It decided to go, somewhere, but it's not really doing anything much, and it's not really controllable. So what we need to do is hold the hotkey down and go to RetroArch by pushing the hotkey X. And we're going to go back down to controls. And for the port 1 controls, notice the device type says gamepad, and gamepads are not absolute positioning, so there's no potentiometer in there. So all it has buttons. So it's not going to be fun to play Breakout with left and right only. You need absolute positioning with a paddle. So what we're going to do is we're going to go hit enter here, and you'll notice that there is a setting for paddles. And if you don't have the setting, it means you have a really old core. This was introduced in version 3.93. You can see at the bottom, it says Stella 2014 3.3. If you don't have this version, then just update your core and you'll be able to see this. I'm going to go ahead and select paddles. And then notice that for some reason, both fire buttons are set to player 2. Well, we need player 1 fire button. So 0 should be player 1 fire button instead. I want to change that to player 1 fire button. Okay. And then if you go further down, you'll see that it has automatically detected our axis 2 and axis 3, and it's mapped them to player 1 and player 2, so which is correct. If your settings are not like this, you're going to need to update these as well. I'm going to go ahead and push back, and I'm going to save this game remap file so I don't have to do this. You don't want to do a save core remap file because then it's going to overwrite what we did before. Only paddle games you want to do this with. If you want to do it only once for all your paddle games, you can move the paddle games into a folder and then save this as a content directory remap file. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just save it for this particular game. So we're good here. And actually, I'm going to check port 2 controls as well, just to make sure we're okay there as well. Yep, this one is also needs to change to paddles. And then I'm going to change button 0 to be player 3 instead of player 4. Okay. Wheels are set up correctly. Go ahead and resave this one. Save remap file for the game. And I'm going to go back, quick menu, and resume. Okay. So now you can see, I do have paddle controls. So as I move to the right, got paddle to the right and left, it's working quite nicely. So if I push the button, yep, it goes in and starts, and it's very lovely playable. Okay, let's make sure player 2 is also working. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to a 2-player game here. I'm going to push select, the white button. I'm going to go to maybe 2 players on level 4. So go ahead and start. So you can see my paddle is working for player 1 here. I'm going to push start. This. Okay, we're going to let the ball go, and then now player 2. So again, my paddle now, player 2 is functioning very nicely as well. And notice the paddles are pretty jitter-free. This is the latest update that does a really good job. And these paddles are actually pretty old and dirty. If you have cleaner paddles, it'll be even better. But this is very nice and very close to the original. There we go. And the button also works pretty nicely. So there you have it. You've got both paddles working. But what I found interesting is that the Hyperkin device, let's see what happens when I connect the Hyperkin. I'm going to go and connect that to port 1. And notice that when I pushed fire, it did push the fire button, but my paddles is not working. So I'm going to go ahead and go to paddle mode. I'll push P for paddle mode. And but still, it's acting quite not working at all. So what's up with that? And what you'll find is, for some reason, Hyperkin has mapped this to player 2 for some reason. Now it's actually working because I'm on player 2. If I move this knob, it's actually working quite nicely. And so you could play it this way. But it could be a defect in mine. I'm not really sure. They probably, it's just one pin that's might be set up incorrectly. But you can fix it anyway in case it is on player 2. All you need to do is go to the Retropie menu. Again, hotkey, which is the button here, I map with X. And then we're going to go down to controls and player 1 controls. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to swap these 2 guys here. So instead of these being player 2, we're going to make these 2 player 1, and then these 2 player 2. So let's try that. I'm going to change this to player 1, and on to player 2. Last one. We might have to do the buttons too, but let's do this one first. And I'm going to go ahead and leave the screen here. Menu, resume. Okay, I'm going to restart the game. So I'm on player 1, red is player 1, and sure enough, now my thing is working. There it is, quite nicely. But my button is not working, so I have to do that as well. So let's do that. I'm going to go ahead and hotkey. Quickly, we'll set that up. Controls, port 1 control, and we're going to swap player 1 and player 2 hotkeys, fire keys. So there, that goes to player 2. This one goes back to player 1. Okay. Then I'm going to go back a couple of times, quick menu, and resume. Okay, so now probably I can move and press the fire button, and yes, it is working beautifully. That's how you do it. I hope this was helpful and gave you some learnings on how to use RetroArch, Retropie, the Duo device, joysticks. All the things are working perfectly now. So I hope you enjoyed it. Leave me some comments, give me a thumbs up, and subscribe. And if you like the devices, you can get them at www.icode.com. Take care.